New York and on the new Hot 97 app. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
It's Ebro in the morning. Beautiful Laura Styles. Rosenberg's here. Give it up for Letitia James, public advocate, New York City. Back on the program. The Cross Bronx had a sign fall on a car. Yeah. Letitia James wants me to believe that that's not because there's no toll on the Cross Bronx. They haven't fixed the Cross Bronx. It's been falling apart for years. They've recently redone the RFK bridge thing. Yes. It's beautiful and immaculate.
It's gorgeous.
The toll is very high. And you're telling me that they haven't ignored the Cross Bronx to eventually one day shut it down and force people to use the RFK and then turn around and put a toll on the Cross Bronx once they fix it? So you could speak into the mic nice and clear.
Okay, so I don't buy into your conspiracy theory, but I understand and I feel your pain.
Damn, that's good. That's
talk.
Good
politicking.
That was good talk.
Politicking.
That was good talk.
Clap it up, yeah. But I really think it's an issue of infrastructure because there are highways and byways all in the state and the city that are falling apart.
Yes.
And you raise a legitimate concern. And what it speaks to is the fact that we have not received adequate funding from the federal government. And we need adequate funding. And as you know, they are debating an infrastructure bill, which we reject because it's more about privatization. But we need to rebuild our bridges, our tunnels, and our highways, including the Cross Bronx.
So you say we reject. Who's we?
So a number of Democrats have analyzed the proposal that has been put forth by number 45 with regards to infrastructure funding, but it's really nothing more than an attempt to privatize byways and highways and other public assets.
And for us that don't understand, when you say privatize, that means go out, send contracts out to private companies, people pick their favorites, give their buddies money, and fix things.
Correct.
Instead of
using public funds to fix the Cross Bronx, the Brooklyn Bridge, and all these other highways and byways, the FDR, the big potholes that you're seeing. That's all I hear about as I travel all through 5 boroughs.
And this winter was really bad.
It was really bad. The potholes are really, really bad. Our streets and our roads and our bridges are falling down. And what we need is a huge infusion of infrastructure dollars. And it will go a long way in hiring more black and brown people and putting them to work.
Now you're talking that talk. That's what we really want to hear.
So we off the Cross Bronx?
I mean, well, no, there's people actually probably still sitting on the Cross Bronx right now.
This morning.
And speaking of New York City and falling apart, you saw what happened, what was that, a week ago? It hasn't been a week? That big rain we had?
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole city was flooded, and if you was on the train, it was, I mean, everything is flooded around.
Everything is flooded because, listen, our climate change is real, and what we've got to do is reduce our reliance upon the carbon footprint and fossil fuels, which is why I led the way to divest our pension dollars from fossil fuels in the city of New York. And what we have to do is, again, focus on our environment and recognize that the world is changing and it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And if we don't, in about 50 years, all of downtown Manhattan will be flooded. Where you're sitting right now here will be flooded. It's real. And so there's places, where, the weather patterns are changing. The amount of water in our rivers and our oceans is getting higher and higher and higher. It's threatening all of us. And so the question is, what are we doing about it? How are we reducing our reliance upon a carbon, and how are we reducing our reliance upon fossil fuels? What are we doing to recycle? What are we doing to focus on solar energy? What are we doing to just change the way that we live? What are we doing here at this radio station with respect to the environment?
Well, it's why you're here, because we can have these great conversations if we legalize marijuana and people are thinking clear and having great conversation around.
Interesting segue.
You like that? I mean? That was
because
seamless,
that's when real conversation happens, right? We all sit around, we light something up, and we.
Sean, do you have any appropriate music for this conversation?
That's not how it happens. That's not.
No, that's. I think
that brings people together in my world.
You
know
want
what
to
I'm
sit
saying?
back and talk about the earth.
I mean, you can talk about the environment and you can talk about weed, and they are related.
Yeah.
Exactly, because people who are into the environment tend to be also be in the weed too.
You got a point there.
Where does weed come from?
The earth.
See? Thank you, Shawnee.
That's right. Medication.
See?
But no, I mean, it's happening all over the country, right?
9 states.
9 states and more, I'm sure, coming on.
New Jersey's about to come on.
Yeah, and people
Connecticut, no?
I don't know about Connecticut, but definitely New Jersey. I spoke to the governor of New Jersey, and it was part of his platform.
Yeah, so now
And
you're
even Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. And people obviously are seeing the benefit to taxable dollars, right?
It's not about the revenue for me.
Okay.
For me, the issue really is about this war on drugs, which has really been a war on poor people and people and people of color. And the fact that I've represented countless number of young people in the criminal justice system arrested for, $10 bags, spend a night in jail, get a conviction, can't get a housing, can't get a student loan, can't get a job. And 86% of all individuals arrested for marijuana in the state look like you and me.
That's right.
And so, despite the fact that the levels of usage amongst the races and ethnicities are basically the same.
Yeah, and but with the legalization of marijuana comes the fact that the people who were either selling or getting arrested for it, will they get released? And will black and brown people be able to participate in the business of
That's
it?
a good question. So two different and distinct questions, and let's handle them both. So the first issue is with regards to those individuals who have already been convicted. We've got to look at expungement of records. We've got to look at the sealing of records. We've got to look at whether or not we could make sure that individuals who were formerly convicted for relatively low levels of possession, whether or not that they can get their rights back so they can apply for jobs, loans, etc. We're not talking about selling, we're talking about possession. 2, medical marijuana is legal in our city, in our state, and in fact, not too far from here, on 5th Avenue, I cut a ribbon for a dispensary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Called MedMen.
Yep.
MedMen. Yeah.
MedMen, yeah, they're popular all over the country.
And it looks like an Apple store.
Yeah, it's
Walk
very
in,
nice.
It looks like an Apple store. And you can purchase marijuana if you suffer from cancer and a host of other diseases. And you can get topical, you can get the spray, you can get
oils,
CBD oil?
Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You
that.
can get it oil.
Yeah.
You can get it all.
Well, CBD, you can get it Dwayne Reed.
You sure?
Yes. It's not, there's no THC in it. There's no intoxicant
I
in
don't know
CBD.
if I'm getting it at
Look behind
Dwayne
you. Look
Reed.
at the lady behind you.
Yes.
Really? For my dog?
Not Dwayne Reed, but like
Other places?
easily.
It's easy. Okay.
It's
So I
everywhere.
want some for Bear the dog. Aging dogs, they say it's really good for
It's
the
very
joints.
good.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that for your animal, your dog, if they suffer from some sort of ailment, they can get some medical marijuana. And the reality is that the vast majority of individuals who own these dispensaries are white.
That's right.
And so we're transferring wealth from the underground to individuals who unfortunately don't look like you and I. And what we have to do if we pass this bill, and the governor of the state of New York, Governor Cuomo, we've talked about this issue, and that is making sure that we spread the wealth.
That's right.
And that there's ownership, particularly in communities that have been devastated by the drug war.
And don't just dump dispensaries down in bad neighborhoods either.
Correct.
Also, let me just be very blunt and simple here. For as many false, unfair, and wrong, unjust arrests as there have been on black people over drugs, the least you could do is make it easy and reasonable for black people to make some money off of drugs.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because there's been plenty of money made off the backs of black people who've gotten unfair sentences for drug charges and
right.
marijuana
Right.
charges specifically over the
course.
years.
Listen,
Well, and even more so, and not to cut you off, Letitia,
Yeah.
the tax, when this is taxed,
Yeah.
where are those tax dollars going? Are they going back into the neighborhoods that have been decimated?
That's right.
That's really
That's
important.
Right. So it's 2 points. It's 1, it's criminal justice reform, and 2, it's a social justice reform, and 3, it should be an economic engine for communities that have been devastated.
That's right.
So we take the tax dollars, we invest in schools and playgrounds and all those great things that unfortunately communities of color have not received, and that's what this bill does. So I want to give a shout out to Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes out of Buffalo, who's leading this effort in Albany, as well as Senator Velma at Montgomery from Brooklyn. I also want to give a shout out, obviously, to our governor, who is studying this issue.
Yep.
All of the issues that we discussed. How do you address those people who have been previously convicted? What do you do with the surplus, the revenue? How can you reinvest it in communities? What can you do to make sure that there's ownership by black and brown people?
That's
How
right.
do you transfer wealth from the underground to people who have been affected by all of this? All of these issues and more.
And what
how
are
do
the
you
jobs
regulate it?
in and around this industry that you can now tell young people that there's a opportunity for them to have awesome, career opportunities.
How do you train them? How do you get people
Yes.
ready and train them now?
Yes.
And particularly on technology and
Yeah.
science and math and all of that. And so and it's important to understand this is about recreational use for adults, individuals who are 21 and older.
And it's not going and it'll never be a situation just like with alcohol where it'll be okay for you to walk down the street and just smoke weed.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's,
Exactly.
ladies and gentlemen, that's not going to be a thing.
That's just not and it's going to be regulated. And it'll be tracked.
Yes.
So,
Well, and so do you believe that Cuomo is now doing research on this and talking to people? Because Miranda, what's her name? From Sex and the
Cynthia
City.
Nixon.
Yes, she's running for governor. She came out, Miranda was like, yo, legalize it. That's what I'm doing. And then Cuomo had to respond. Or do you think he was already on this page?
So I can't get into the politics. I can only say that Tish James came out. I had a conversation with the governor. He's looking at the issue, and I look forward to working with him on this issue to make sure that we get it right.
And that's where you're at today.
And that's where I'm at today. That's where I've always been.
And so whoever the next governor is, or if he's the governor, if he gets it's another term for him he's running
Correct.
for, right?
Whoever the governor is, I look forward to working with them on legalizing marijuana. But I suspect and I hope that we get it done by the end of this year.
Do you like what's her name? Cynthia Nixon?
Yes.
Stop it. Now you're just.
She's Cynthia Nixon is a very nice person. I know her well.
Really?
Yes.
Do you think that she sincerely cares about the state's politics?
I think listen. Anyone who is willing to put themselves out there and to run for office, because you are subjected to a lot of scrutiny. Your life is under a microscope. Trust me. And so I applaud her for entering into this game we call politics. And so I applaud her. But at the same time, I'm here to discuss marijuana and not to discuss the gubernatorial race.
I would just like to say in closing on the gubernatorial race, me and Alexa definitely had some times back in the day when she was still in college when we would light up the spleef and sit back and watch Sex in the City all day. It was more fun than you think.
Miranda knows.
It was more
She
fun. I was
knows.
surprised, and I kind of liked it in that regard.
Miranda knows.
Can you talk about the whole homeless situation? Because I see people always complaining about the homeless situation, but I also see people protesting that nobody wants these homeless shelters in their neighborhoods. I saw it in Queens especially, but I know it's happening all over.
Yeah, the best way to deal with homelessness is to provide individuals with a permanent home. So day before yesterday, I was at a rally with some ministers, men and women of God, who are proposing to build 15,000 units of housing, low-income housing, senior housing on NYCHA property, beginning in East New York. And what they need are resources. And what we also need is to have an appointment with Ben Carson, who's the head of HUD, because there's some obstacles to building housing on NYCHA land. And so,
You think Ben Carson actually cares?
if he would meet these ministers, I'm confident that they would find some common ground, because he is a man who is of great faith. Saying all of that, I think this proposal that they have put forward is a step in the right direction and will go a long way in addressing homelessness in the city of New York.
So the idea is, this sounds foul. Naturally, people in their nice neighborhood that they pay a lot of money to live in don't necessarily want a homeless shelter
That's
downstairs.
the issue right now. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And we can all be judgmental about that, but we also sort of understand how people could feel that way, because you have a lot of people who are maybe dealing with really tough circumstances and whatever. Anyways, they think the better solution then would be to actually find permanent homes. That's what you're saying.
Find permanent homes. And there are opportunities to build in the city and the state of New York. And it would be great if we could build on state land. It would be great if we can build over rail yards. It would be great if we can build in underutilized public housing, spaces that are not being utilized currently. It would be great if we could use more supportive housing. It would be great if we could build up. There's this hospital over near Randall's Island. It would be great if we could build there. We haven't even examined that, but that's state-owned property. There are so many opportunities, but what we needed is a visionary, and what we need is someone who is going to get past all of the bureaucracy, check your ego at the door, and build, baby, build.
And that's a direct shot at, I'm sure, Cuomo and de Blasio, who let their egos.
I'm not taking a shot at anybody. I'm talking about individuals who are homeless tonight. I think all too often people focus on these elected officials. I see every day people who look like me and who look like you, who are homeless, who are struggling, who are doubled up and tripled up, whose rent is too goddamn high. It's time that we set aside politics and deal with individuals who are struggling and hurting in the city of New York.
Because this is an issue that affects so many people. There's so many
We have a
people.
housing. We are currently living in a housing crisis.
Well, yeah, I
No
believe
doubt.
it. And by the way, it affects everyone.
Everybody.
It affects the people who are homeless. It affects
That's
the
right.
people whose neighborhoods they're now homeless. It affects everyone.
Look at that young man in Brooklyn who was shot by the police, who unfortunately was having a problem and was decompensating. And everyone knew that he had a problem. The question is, why did he not get help? The question is, why was he not in supportive housing? Why wasn't a social worker or a caseworker?
But doesn't this go back to how we started our conversation with the Cross Bronx falling apart and the streets flooding and all of this needing actual resources
Yes.
allocated?
Yes. But there was a time when the federal government cooperated with the state and the city. The federal government has now walked away from urban centers. So the issues that we are seeing in New York City
So
are
wait,
the same
you're
issues.
telling me
Yeah.
the current president doesn't care what's going on in
urban centers
places where there's a high concentration of black and brown and poor
who
people?
tend to vote Democratic. Could you believe that?
Wow, that's crazy.
Well,
I never thought.
But the reality is that public housing, we haven't invested, the federal government hasn't invested in public housing in over 20 some odd years, which is why the capital needs of public housing is in the billions of dollars.
So this isn't
And
even
you got
just the current president. This isn't
600,000
even the current
people.
president.
This is not even the current president. You got 600,000 people living with roaches and rats and rodents and asbestos
Well,
and
that's
lead.
my thing with the NYCHA thing more recently.
Yeah.
That has become a hot topic, right,
is a
under
hot
De
topic,
Blasio.
yeah.
But I clearly remember these same NYCHA problems been going on.
Right, because again, like I said, the federal government has not funded NYCHA in 30 some odd years. You know, I mean, it was created by the federal government. The federal government walked away. And so who was left holding the bag? The state and the city. The state recently decided to put some money up front, and everyone says now it's the responsibility of the city. But the federal government built public housing. And the reality is that at one point in time, the federal government worked and cooperated with municipalities and states all across this nation. And now they've stepped back and said, nope, it's not our responsibility.
And Letitia, you expect me to believe, well, maybe you don't expect me to believe this, but that currently the decision makers and the people with a lot of money care about these public housing right here in Manhattan in prime real estate, or on waterfront property out in Coney Island, or in these real prime real estate locations
just say this
that
to
they're
you.
going to actually try to build these things back up and not force those people out of those areas so that they can put some more expensive housing in.
I can tell you that the men and women, the clergy that I rallied with the other day, who represent residents of public housing care.
They care.
They care. And if we listen to them and work with them, then public housing we can build again on underutilized land. We can provide senior housing. Grandmas and grandpas who are living in oversized apartment. What does that mean? Apartments where they got 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, and their children have left the apartment, and they're all alone in that apartment. They are willing to relocate into these new shiny apartments in their neighborhood and give up that 3 and 4 bedroom apartment for a woman with 3 and 4 children.
Right.
That's what we need to do. Have a discussion with them, but what you need is an authentic voice and someone who understands and who believes in them and who obviously can relate to them, and someone who cares for them. And as someone who has relatives in the public housing, someone who has dinner in their humble homes each and every day, someone who prays with them and recognizes their problems, I think what you need in the city and in the state are leaders who can check their egos at the door and who can put
Find some
politics aside
solutions.
and find some solutions, solution oriented. That's really, and can get shit done.
I guess
Whoops.
I'm being cynical and you know, there's a negative tone to everything I'm saying right now, because I'm living in a time where I'm watching, and obviously we saw it with Donald Trump, and now we're seeing it with an individual that we all thought knew what he was talking about, or at least cared about
Somewhat.
hip hop. Kanye West. And
Why
you
did
know,
we
that
think we knew
clown-
what he was talking about? I know.
Why did we
shouldn't
even
have.
do that?
I know.
I heard the discussion.
Why did we even
a
do
lot.
that?
I know it's
But
a lot.
I do believe that we're just living in a time where people are either forgetting where they came from, forgetting the human elements of what makes America great, a great idea in the first place, right? And all we're focused on is money. And all we're focused on is getting rich, and we're not taking care of people who need
No, you're
support.
right. And you know what? listen, we got to take care of low and moderate income families. We've got a middle class, which is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You got a tax on the labor movement. And I'm a big proponent of the labor movement. And what we need to do is expand labor and expand unions, because that's what created the middle class.
What's expand labor mean? What's that mean?
Unions.
Okay.
And there's an attack on a union. There's a Supreme Court decision about to be handed down now, in a case that was supported by the right wing, which basically says, which is going to decimate unions in our
Well, because
country.
corporate America doesn't like unions. That was why unions came about in the first place, was to protect people.
Unions created the middle class. The reason why we got Social Security, we got pensions, we got minimum wage, we got the weekend off, and we've got more and more people entering into the middle class. The reason why you got Southeast Queens is because of the unions. And so we got to support unions. And so we got to build unions and talk about unions and talk about what they did to make America as great as it is now. It doesn't need to be made great again. It's already great. We got to understand and recognize that and fight for what's right. And
well, America's going in a great direction.
It is going in a great direction.
Or could be going in a great direction.
It is going, because, again, you look at those young people who marched out.
Yes, true.
It's great.
True.
The women,
true.
Great.
True.
Come on, just think
True.
about all of that. Feed into all of that. And people want to change in the direction of our government. So that's why I believe in them. I believe in our government. I don't believe in politicians. I don't believe in number 45. I don't believe in his vision. What I believe in, people who want to get things done, people who are activists. And I consider myself not
There's
a
a huge
politician,
grassroots movement, for
but
sure.
I consider myself someone on the ground who believes in getting things done.
Letitia James is her name. Marijuana legalization.
It's her game.
I
got you.
My guy right there. Give it up, Letitia James. Great seeing you again.
Thank you. And truth and justice is what she's all about.
That's right. And do you have a shout out Instagram or Facebooks and
At Tish James.
At Tish James. At NYCPA.
These are important things. I know. Listen,
I
it is
know.
very important now.
It is. We're all about social media. And so what gives you, come over here quickly. Come.
Shouldn't want to be on camera.
I know. Tell them who you are.
I'm Morgan. I am her press secretary. You can follow her, tweet her at Tish James, at NYCPA. Yeah.
That's
Make
Morgan.
her. Will you
That's
make
Morgan.
her? Will you make her job easier and start shouting these things out?
That's Morgan. No, I want Morgan to get some attention.
That's right.
Okay, you're trying to get
That
some
was a plot.
shine.
That was a plot.
yeah.
Morgan doesn't want to be.
Morgan, you gotta
She doesn't
build
want nobody
people.
to know
You
her.
got to build people up.
That's
you got to
right.
put
True.
young people in positions of power and let
I
them
like
taste
it.
it and feel it.
And I didn't know there was a MedMan on. Where is it? Fifth
It's
and
on
what?
5th Avenue, 5th and
It just opened, yeah.
Yeah,
I read
14th
about
Street, 16th Street. Go over there.
My knee is hurting too.